on social bite-sized learning. In this lesson, I'm going to take you through how you create a painterly repeat pattern that's completely seamless. There's lots of ways of creating repeat within Photoshop. Some are more trickier than others, especially if it's got a lot of texture. So to start off with, if you're using a painterly image, it might be a piece of your own artwork, make sure you scan it in a high resolution. I often recommend my own students scan it in at least 300 dpi. If you're wanting to enlarge that image much bigger, you might even go up to 600 dpi and then open up in Photoshop. So what I always suggest with the Creative Club exercises, have a quick read through the handout. That'll get you started, but it'll also give you a little bit of insight into what I'm going to talk you through. So let's get started with this one. So I've already scanned this image in here. So this is a little painting that I did. It's got a lot of different layers of colours and brush strokes going on. It's also very bright in colour. You can adjust the colour if you want to, depending on what you're scanning in, using image adjustments, hue and saturation, and so on. I'll just cancel out of that. I'll keep the colour I already have. Now before we get through the process, I want to share with you, the pattern preview. Let's get into pattern preview mode. So view down to pattern preview, and you'll see, okay to that, what's happening at this stage. So this is the little image I've scanned in, and I've used a pattern preview that puts it into a pattern. But at this stage, you can see that it's not seamless. That means you can see where the block is and bits where it don't join up. So this lesson is going to take you through how do we actually sort of make this piece of painterly artwork join into a complete repeat. Let's just switch that off just now, and I'll show you the end result, and then I'm going to talk you through the process. Okay, and I'll click the pattern preview again, and okay. So this time it's quite a wild looking repeat, but it is completely seamless at this point. You can't see where that initial block came from. So let's get started with the process. And you can work with the pattern preview on, but I find it quite distracting, so I often switch it off. Right, to get started, what I often recommend is you take a copy of your original one that's not in repeat. So let's duplicate the layer. Okay. I'm just moving it around. What I want to do now is go to filter, down to other, down to offset. So what we're doing here, we're cutting the image into 4 quarters, and everything's getting swapped around. It's the same way you would do if you're doing a repeat manually. You can see, for example, this bit here meets up there, this bit joins here, and so on. The bit that we have to work in is this section here. So you have this offset dialog box that pops up. Make sure the wrap round is clicked, and also you can play around with the horizontal and the vertical settings. There's no exact number you put in. It depends on your image and the size of your image, and it doesn't have to be directly in the middle. It'll still work if you've got it like that, but I think we're often drawn to working with things in the middle, and that's not quite in the middle, but it's going to work just the same. And click OK. So what we're working on now, let's zoom in a little bit, and also to explain before I get started in actually editing this image, I'm actually using a Wacom pen and tablet, and that allows me to draw a little bit better. If you're working using a laptop and a trackpad, it's a little bit trickier to edit some of this here. So it's a good idea if you're going to use lots of painterly work to get a hold of a Wacom pen and tablet. It makes life so much easier. It might work okay with a mouse, but certainly if you're wanting to have a little bit more painterly control over this, a Wacom pen is going to allow you to do that. So we're going to use a tool called the Spot Healing tool. If it's not already in your toolbar, I'll just click out there. If you go to the 3 little dots at the bottom of your toolbox, click on there. It's in fact the same one because I've been using it, but if you go to the lists, you'll find it down there. So the spot healing brush tool. Okay, and let's click off. So now I've got it back on. So at this point you can see where the little circle is, that's the bit it's going to paint. You can adjust your brush size. I can go smaller, bigger. I can change the type of brush, but I'm going to keep with a soft brush just now. We want it relatively soft so that it starts to blend in a little bit, but not too soft that it becomes a little bit fuzzy. So it's playing around the settings a little bit there. And I'll go a little bit bigger. Oops, that's it back down. I can also type in the number there as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, using the content aware, it's going to recognise the content within here. I'm using the Wacom and I've been quite quick with it. You can see how they're starting to blend. It's almost like a posh clone tool. Those that's been using Photoshop for a while are familiar with the clone tool, and also sometimes the frustrations of using the clone tool. And you can see it's starting to blend. And I'm doing this quicker than I would normally if I'm cleaning it up for a client or for a freelance job. But you can see that line is starting to break down. The colours are blending. So if you get something that's very painterly, this is a really good tool to use. And you can see I'm not just going along the line, I'm going a little bit deeper into it there. And the reason for that being is I want it not to look as if I've just fixed this crosshair in the middle. I want it to blend in a little bit better. And you can see sometimes with the process you get a lot of different marks and colours here, which you may or may not like. It might be blending a bit too much, but I'm going to show you how you can edit some of that as well. So I'm doing this pretty quickly, but you can start to see how the colours are blending. So I'm just working really across this bit here and along the bottom. So normally if I was doing this myself, and again it would depend on the complexity of the painting that I'm using, it might take me half an hour to 40 minutes to get it to a level that I think works. So it's not too obvious where the original repeats is. So that's just taken probably a minute to do. And I can keep going back over bits there, but I think you'll probably get the idea. So at this stage, believe it or not, it's in repeat. It might not be a great repeat, but it is in a seamless repeat. Let's go back into View and Pattern Preview, and I'll show you what's happened. And OK to that. I'll zoom out. So you remember the one that I showed you before? That was the one I showed you before. And this is it corrected. So you can see a little bit there, but it is in technical repeats. And I often switch the pattern preview on and off so that I can see, okay, which bits do I need to improve on. I think it's working quite nicely here, but there's quite a lot of bits where it's a bit muddy, it's overlapping. So I'm going to work along this section here. Let's switch the pattern preview off again. And zooming in. So what I want to do now is sort of paint over some of these bits here. So we're not using the spot healing tool, we're going to start using some of the paint brushes, which you've already seen the ones before. Let's create a new layer for this. And I'll be picking up colours that's within the actual painting. Let's pick up this blue here. Now I'm going to use a paintbrush this time. Now it goes to different, you can bring up different paintbrushes. I've got one that is a slight texture here, and that texture is going to help. You can see as I'm hovering over there, it's not like your basic round brush, it's got a slight texture. So within your brushes, this is using a dry media, you've got different ones you can use. You've got your general brushes, which is just your soft and rounded ones there, and you've got your dry ones and you've also got your wet ones. But I like a dry brush for this because it's been painted using a sort of dry brush method. So let's bring in one of the ones we have. I'll go for this one. Or which one did I have before? Put the pencil, and let's use this a little bit bigger. So, because I'm working a separate layer and I'm using the Wacom pen and I'm painting almost the same way as I would if I was painting with a brush, with soft brush strokes. So I'm looking at parts of the design where that blue is coming over and I just want it blending a little bit. So I'm being quite soft using the brush. So you get that texture coming through. I might just pick up another colour. This one here is slightly darker in tone, but I'll use the same brush. So I'm blending over it. And the good thing about doing a separate layer, you can switch it on and off. But already you can see this bit that was a little bit muddy from using the spot healing tool. When we painted over it, it's starting to blend some of these ones here. And I could keep building it up. And because these are tones of blue, I could create a separate layer, but I don't mind if they start to blend. What I can also do with the brushes, at this stage I'm using the brush in a normal mode, but I can change that around. As you'll see, I've changed it to multiply, and as I start to overlap bits using the multiply, the colour is darker. So you're seeing the colours underneath coming through. And again, I've been quite subtle with the pressure of the brush. Let's create a new layer as I bring in a completely different colour. So you've got some of this bright pink. Picking up the eyedropper, and I'm going to paint. I'm just going to keep the same type of brush, and I'm blending some of these bits. I might go a little bit bigger. And I've got the multiply, but all means you can try lots of different modes to see what you get with it. And that's a good thing. If you're doing a separate layer, it can change. And so on. And again, so I'm not just working over that one bit there. I'm bringing some other little bits of the paint in other parts of the painting, so that again, it doesn't look as if I'm just fixing that one area. I'm going to look at this bit here, and I'm going a little bit darker. Again, I can layer things over the top. Just change the layer modes. So again, they're blending in that little bit more. And I might be overdoing it a little bit, but you're certainly getting the idea. Also, I don't think this bit here works overly well, so I'll just pick up a new layer. And I'll bring in some of that bright green. And I don't like this bit here, so I'll cover over, go back to normal mode, over some of that there as well. And the more I'm pressing down using the Wacom, the bigger the painting, the stroke. And you can get carried away with this. If I'm not too sure, I'll just undo that bit and I'll pick up a new layer. And I can give them names, but I'm not too worried about that just now. You probably hear the tapping. This is me using the Wacom to create some of the effects of the drawing. Okay, so let's put on, yes, I could do a little bit more with that, but I think you get the idea of what I'm doing. not too sure what's happening there, I could just quickly go new layer and okay, let's bring in a sort of colour that's in between. And I think it needs a bigger brush, because sometimes if the brush, that's better. It's just broken that down a little bit. I thought it was a little bit too heavy. I'll bring it in some other bits just to break it up. Okay. Let's bring in the pattern preview again. So pattern preview. Okay. And zoom in. Again, not too sure about this bit now, but it's definitely in technical repeat. And you may or may not like that, but it is in repeat. Let's come out of the pattern preview. Now at this stage, you want to, we're just going to change this bit. This bit is annoying me. I'm not a fan of this colour. Let's go. I could actually just take the layer off. Okay, we'll leave it at that. What I want to do now is make it in, or to define the pattern. And I can save a copy, but I'm just going to flatten it down at this point. Okay, so you've got the repeats. So what we want to do is actually define this so that we can make a pattern with it. So if we want to use another file, we can do. So let's go to edit, down to define pattern. I can change, that's got a big long name. Oops. Just call it paint to repeat. Okay. So what we can do now, I'll just create a new layer. Let's show you, you can then fill it with pattern, edit, fill, and there's a pattern we've just made. I'll fill it with the pattern, okay, and it's doing it to the scale that's there. Let's undo that. The way that I often use my patterns is go to layer, new fill layer, pattern, and say okay. Now this horrible default design always pops up for some reason. Clicking on that one there, and this is it here. So what we can do now is we can change the scale of the repeats. So I could type in a number, so that's taking it down to 50%. Also at this stage, you can, well, you've scaled it down, or you can also scale it up. I can reduce the angle, and I think that's a really useful tool, because actually sometimes just by setting your design at an angle, it can create more movement, and I feel as if it's actually got more movement when we put an angle in it. So you could trial that. You can change it. If you see here, you've got the pattern fill within your layers. If you want to change the scale, you can just click on it and change it there. And equally, you could change the angle if you want to. So that's how to use, or how to create painterly repeats. It does take a little bit of time, but it's certainly worth it. What you can also do, or when you've got it in the pattern fill, what you can't do, first of all, it's good to troubleshoot, is you can't change the colour of it. What you have to do, if you want another colour version of the same one, let's click on to the background, because this is the repeat unit, the block that actually, to bring it into the pattern preview, that actually repeats. So you remember that was works. Let's switch that off. So we could take a duplicate of that. So we have, and we could adjust the colour. I'm just popping into hue and saturation. So I can change the colour. So I've got a completely different colourway. Not very nice. Let's take that saturation. Sometimes I'm obsessed with bright colours, so you can play around with the different colour modes you've got there. Let's see. Okay, so again, if I just look in pattern preview, that's still in repeat. Switch off. And again, you can define that pattern. Edit, define pattern, Again, it's got the big long name that was original. Oops. File, name, and OK. So we want to bring the pattern fill in, new layer, OK, and layer, new fill layer, pattern. Oops, here we are. Layer, new fill layer, and pattern. I clicked off that. Sometimes when I'm using the Wacom pen, it can be a little bit tricky. Here we go. Pattern. That's this. And say OK, and find where you last put the pattern. Click on, and you can change it. Bigger, smaller, still in repeat. You can type it in. Remember, you've got the change of angles. So that's how to create a painterly repeat. Enjoy having a go with that one.